Hello and welcome back to another video, and today we're going to make the most fantastic and, as you can see, the most simple steak and ale pie you could ever imagine. All we need is some lovely beef, some good quality beef stock. I'm going to use a red onion, some nice beer and some salt, pepper, mustard and flour just to coat the beef before we fry it off. Now I'm going to use a slow cooker to stew the beef because I'm going to cook it overnight. Now you can cook it in a slow cooker on a low heat for 8 to 10 hours or a high heat for 5 hours, or you can do it in the oven on a low temperature if you've got a casserole pot. So the first thing we're going to do is just set this aside for now. I'm going to take a plastic bag, and in here I've got flour, salt, pepper and mustard powder, and we're just going to coat the beef before we fry it off. Now the cuts that I'm using here, you can see it's wonderful, beautiful shin of beef, and this is on the bone, so we can see here this marrow. We're going to leave that on, and this is going to melt down and render into the sauce, and it's going to thicken up, and it should produce a really lovely, rich, thick sauce. So I've got 2 big slices of shin on the bone. That totals about £1 in weight, or 450 grams. There's probably a good ½ pound of meat on there. So I've taken some diced chuck steak just to make up the meat value to roughly a good £1 in weight. So just coat each piece of beef which should give them a nice golden brown colour when we fry them off. So that's all we're looking for, a nice liberal coating on each piece, and hopefully there's going to be enough for either 4 individual pies or enough for a great big pie that's going to serve 4 to 6 people. So we'll just carry on coating this beef. Now you can use whatever cut of beef that you want. I've gone for the shin, like I say, because it's got that marrow bone in, and that's hopefully going to thicken up the sauce. So we'll cook it on the bone, and in the morning we'll take the bone out and pull the beef, shred it a little bit into smaller chunks. But like I say, use whatever cut that you want. It'll work well with anything. Even the diced chuck, which is off the shoulder, works fantastic. You can use brisket, topside, whatever you want. So, there you can see, got all that beef nicely covered. Now we're just going to brown this off in a pan, and then we'll move over to the slow cooker. So we've got some oil on the stove here, just heating up nicely, and we're just going to brown off the beef in this pan. So we just want to gently brown that beef. We won't put too much in the pan at one time because we don't want to lose all of the heat out of the pan. But we just want a nice bit of colour on each side of this beef. So just a couple of minutes on each side. See, that's browning off nicely. Just see already that bone marrow there is starting to soften ever so slightly. I don't know if you can quite see that on the camera there. Just starting to soften up. So I've just finished browning off the beef, and also the red onions. I just threw those in the pan as well to give them a little bit of colour, and you can see already it looks pretty darn good. So we'll set up a slow cooker now, and we'll check back in just a second. So when I said this was an easy recipe, I really wasn't kidding. This is all you need. They are fantastic. If you haven't got one, honestly, buy yourself one. You won't regret it. I'd like to do things overnight, just on a low temperature. You can forget about them. They don't burn. And when things come out of these slow cookers, they are so tender. So we've got those wonderful pieces of shin. We'll just sit those in the bottom there, and then we'll spread about these pieces of diced chuck. Now just let these sit for 2 or 3 minutes just to relax a little bit before we put them in here. Now in with the beer. There's probably about, not quite half a pint there, 200 mils, something like that. And the beef stock. Now if you've got time to make your own beef stock, good on you. Of course it's better, but I've just bought this from the supermarket and it's every bit as good. So it's not quite all covered, but that's fine. I don't want a particularly runny sauce. Just for when we fill these pies, we want everything to be set nicely so it doesn't slop out everywhere. So we'll turn this on now, just onto low, and we'll let that tick over overnight. Just make sure nothing's sort of poking out of the cooking liquor. Just settle everything down, pop the lid on, and we will check back tomorrow morning when it should be lovely and tender. Just to quickly run through with you guys what we've got in here. We've got a pound of your choice of beef cut. We've gone for shin here, mixed in with some chuck steak. We've got a chopped red onion. We've got about a pint of beef stock and about half a pint of beer. And we've just browned off the beef, popped it into a slow cooker, and it's going to be sat on low for about 8 hours. Now, of course, you don't have to use beer if you don't want to. You can add kidney if you want. Add in any vegetables that you want. You don't even have to make this as a pie. It makes a wonderful casserole. So there's lots of things you can do with this. As I say, I think these slow cookers are a great investment. Either a slow cooker or a casserole pot. They both work really well. Yeah, so we'll pop the lid on and we'll see this in the morning. Well guys, we've been cooking this for about 10 hours now. So just lift the lid off. And you can see how beautiful and tender that looks. So what we're going to do is take this off the heat now. I'm going to strip it off the marrow bones, strip the shin off the marrow bones, and I'm going to pop this in the fridge until I need it, probably tonight, maybe tomorrow, and then we'll get on with making the pies. Well, sorry about the bleary voice in the last clip, guys. That was 5 o'clock this morning and I hadn't long been out of bed, but you can see here I've got the filling cooled and transferred to a dish, and it looks fantastic, and I've had a little taste and trust me, it is unbelievable. So next we're going to make the pastry, and this is a hot water crust pastry that we're going to make. It's an easy pastry to make. All we need is 100 mils of water and 80 grams of lard, and we're going to bring that up to the boil, and then to that, we're going to add that to 225 grams of plain white flour, and then we're going to use this pastry as the base of the pie, and we're just going to use some shop bought puff pastry as the lids of the pies. So we'll get on and make this now. So we've just brought the water and lard up to the boil. We're just going to add this in. Hopefully that doesn't steam up the lens. Might well have done. Where are you? Over here. Here. Any better? Sorry about that. And we're just going to stir this in to the flour. Obviously don't use your hands at this point. It's still very hot. It takes a little bit of working. We're just going to work this in, and then we're going to chill it in the fridge for a good half hour, maybe a little bit more. And like I say, we're going to use this as the base for the pies, and then we're just going to top the pies with a pre-made shop bought puff pastry, because it's so much easier and every bit as good, to be honest. I'll just about work with that now. It's a super easy pastry to make this. You can't really go too far wrong. You can see it comes together very, very easy. And this is very similar to the pastry that we use at work for our pies in the shop. Just in case it wasn't obvious enough, I do work in a butcher's shop. You just want to work that just until it goes smooth. There we go. Easy as that. So we're just going to cover that in cling film, and this is hopefully going to be enough to make 4 individual pies. Obviously we've got plenty of filling, they're going to be deep filled, so you're probably not going to need a lot of mashed potato to go with one of these pies. But we'll pop this in the fridge, let it rest a little bit, and then we'll get on to filling out the pies. Right, so we've chilled the pastry down now, and you can see it's sort of changed in consistency. Now what I have got here are some foil casings for the pies. You can get these at any home cookery shop or home supply store. So with this ball of pastry, we're just going to cut this into 4 roughly equal pieces. And each one of these is going to form a base for the pie. So just a little bit of flour out on the chopping board. I'm just going to roll this out nice and thin. So that should be about right. Now we're going to pop this in to the pie tin and just press it right the way down. Just like so, and work it all the way up the side of the tin. We don't need to grease these because this has got quite a lot of fat in the pastry. It should come out reasonably easy. And now we're just going to trim off the excess pastry right off the top, because we're going to use a puff pastry lid for these pies. Nothing too fancy, as long as we've got a little bit of a lip. So we'll do that with the other 3 foils, sorry. Okay, so we finished off the pie bases there. Now all that we need to do is fill them with our lovely beef. And I've probably gone way overboard on how much I've made, but never mind. There's probably enough here for 6 pies. And there was probably enough pastry actually for 6 pies. But fill them nice and full. Yeah, definitely enough meat there for 6 pies. Never mind, we've done 4. So all we've got left to do is top them off with our puff pastry, and I've just bought some from the shop. It's so much easier. And who has time to make puff pastry? Not me. So all we need to do set these to one side. Pie on. Just trace around roughly the size of your pie. Just check that that's going to fit. Of course it is. And just use this one as a template. We'll cut out the 4 lids, just like so. Now with the rest of this pastry, I'm trying to rush this a little bit for the camera, but you can make some nice decorations if you wanted. Just take in strips of pastry, maybe make a lattice pattern, or if you're creative, maybe a flower or whatever you want. But I'm doing this in real time for you, so we'll pop these lids straight on. And just pinch right the way around so we get a nice seal. And if you fancy, you could always take a fork, pop in a little pattern around the outside of the pie. Obviously take your time a little bit more than me, and then a couple of slash marks just to let any of the steam that might come out of those pies out so they don't sweat inside. And there we have it. All we need to do is brush this with a little bit of egg and milk, and we'll bake this for probably 35 minutes in a medium oven, 180 degrees or gas mark 4. And I'll show you the results in just a second.